Hi, welcome to the second video on this channel. If you didn't watch my previous video on Victorian era jewelry, I basically just started this channel because I really wanted like a little digital space where I could pour all my niche interests about specific artists or eras in art history that I find particularly interesting. I really don't have any desire or like goal to go anywhere substantial with this. This is really more of a passion thing. It's a me thing. Also, I just feel like these videos will be really rewarding to look back on in a few years. Just knowing that I put so much personal effort and time into like making these and like doing my own research on these, even if it's not particularly for school credit or academia related. Also, I just feel like it'll help me become a lot more well versed in the art world, which is a personal long-term goal of mine. So I really wanted to do my first artist specific video on Georgia O'Keeffe because Georgia O'Keeffe was actually one of my mother's favorite artists when she was an art student in Korea and as she was a professor. One of the first works my mother showed me by O'Keeffe was actually Red Poppy. I was pretty young at the time, so I wasn't really versed in the language of interpreting art. Like, I had no idea what symbolism was or what any juxtapositions were and what anything really meant like deeply in art, but purely visually what drew me to this piece was its like astonishingly warm, bright, vivid tones of red and orange. And because it is such a close-up portrait of a flower, because usually when you think of a painting of a flower, you think of the whole thing. Like, you think of its petals, you think of its stems, you think of the leaves attached to it, but O'Keeffe with her flowers has always made a note of making its dimensions super zoomed in, so you only see the very interior of the flower. And despite it being so zoomed in, you can just still really embrace its vividness, its beauty, its warmth. And despite my bias as it being one of the first paintings I've seen by her, is one of my favorites. Georgia O'Keeffe was a leading icon in the 20th century art world. And, you know, you could really just call her the mother of modern art. She was a super major figure in American modernist and precisionist art. And if you didn't know, in this era, there were so many new, like, trends, so many new forms, so many new styles. Like, it was really the era for contemporary growth in the art world. But remarkably, she just remained to stay independent and stay true to really finding her own vision and art style, which is so respectable. She really based her style on finding these essential abstract forms in nature. She had this exceptional, keen sense of observation and just a lot of finesse with her paintbrush, in which she recorded these beautifully, like I mentioned previously, these beautifully subtle nuances of color, yet so like enlivened within her paintings. So O'Keeffe was born in 1887 in Wisconsin and received an art training at the Art Institute of Chicago in 1905. She started her career off as just a normal, regular art teacher and taught in various schools within her local neighborhoods. Even though she's known for her watercolor and her oil paintings, she actually used to do a lot of charcoal sketches and charcoal drawings. She produced this series of charcoal drawings that actually were the series that boosted her career and her fame as an artist. So in 1916, Alfred Stieglitz, who was a pretty renowned New York gallery owner and prominent photographer at the time, saw these charcoal drawings that O'Keeffe had sent in a letter just to her friend to show her as a gift. And he was captivated by these drawings. He thought they were so beautiful and remarkable. So he actually decided to exhibit them in January 1916 at the 291 Gallery, where a lot of works from many avant-garde European and American artists were already being shown there. And this gallery was actually her stepping stone to her fame. Her work was received by the public with enormous praise, enormous positive feedback. So Stieglitz continued to organize her work in these infamous galleries like the Andersons and the Intimates. And by the late 1920s, O'Keeffe had managed to become one of New York's most celebrated modernist artists. However, before all this renowned fame, when Stieglitz first primarily took a particular interest in Georgia's work, he was pretty heavily criticized for believing that American art could equal the level and precision of European art. And he had this widely unpopular opinion that women could create art equal to art produced of men. Like, go Stieglitz, girl boss, right? No. Because unfortunately things are too good to be true, and he really only had this feminist notion behind this theory because he equated the creative process with sexual energies. And from the beginning, like right from the beginning when he promoted O'Keeffe's work in these galleries, he really set to define it in his own terms, and he decided to define it in terms of gender, and declaring her imagery as kind of like this visual manifestation of sexually liberated woman. He really worked to push this image of her, and in 1921 he actually provided his own visual equivalents for his ideas by exhibiting this large number series of photographs that he took of O'Keeffe. And many of these photographs presented her nude or in various stages of undressing, usually sometimes posed nude in front of her own paintings and artwork. And obviously there's nothing wrong with this, especially this being the early 1900s. The idea of sexually liberating women is awesome. But the fact that Stieglitz kind of forced this notion into Georgia O'Keeffe's work, and it is a little problematic considering the fact that his only main reasoning for thinking that female artists are as equitable to deserving recognition alongside their male competitors is because of their more feminine or sexual nature. So in 1918, when her fame really started boosting, Georgia O'Keeffe continued to produce her abstract art, such as provocative works of her career. And this, I would say, is her most highly renowned era. However, in 1919, she kind of took a dramatic turn in her style. And she kind of decided to paint these delineated or unrecognizable forms. And I think this is actually due to a response and kind of increasing awareness of Stieglitz's ideas about her work. And at the time, O'Keeffe was also a member of the National Woman's Party, which was one of the most radical feminist organizations of the early 20th century. And she really rejected this essentialist notion that women inherently possess a set of particular character traits. And accordingly, she really strongly objected to gendered interpretations of her work, as well as to this over-sexualized public image Stieglitz had kind of pronounced upon her. Now, their relationship also took a romantic turn, and as her art career began to heat up, so did their affair. And mind you, Stieglitz was actually already very much married during this time. And maybe it was New York. Maybe it was the juvenile joy that this booming fame and career had given her. Or maybe she really did feel true love for Stieglitz and it blinded her. But she was the other woman in this affair. Over the course of her career, she created somewhere around 200 images of flowers. She had, like I said before, her essentialist notion with nature. She really had this particular intrigue with flowers. She said once, quote, "When you take a flower in your hand and really look at it, it's your world for the moment. I want to give that world to someone else. Most people in the city rush around so they don't have time to look at a flower, and I want them to see it whether they want to or not." In one of her most infamous painting series, the Red Canna series, she focuses on these close-up images and interior views of flowers. What's so astonishing about these works is that she's able to carefully balance this realm between realism and abstractionism and just combine this remarkable synthesis of form and color. A lot of her work's inspiration at the time actually came from Lake George, which was where she spent a majority of her time with Stieglitz, who he actually ends up leaving his former wife for to marry Georgia O'Keeffe. And there's this one painting that really strikes me that she did of Lake George. And it just really goes to highlight her ability to layer these objective and subjective meanings of her work. For example, like in this painting of Lake George, she has this point of focus where this like almost soul-soothing blue is this reflection. And this clear and concise reflection can kind of symbolize how people see the world in a reflection of who they are. For example, like if one is an optimist, they're always going to find and see something good in their reflection of the lake. However, if they're a pessimist, they're just always going to be looking for the negative reflections or derealizations of their world. And another one of her most infamous paintings is the third piece in her Black Iris series. And it's one of my favorites as well. And this particular painting is actually kind of what sparked this major controversy over whether her work really referenced female genitalia and sexuality. This controversy also really fueled this idea of her as an artist who really promoted like super overt sexuality. And this idea that people described her work as this morphological metaphor for female genitalia, kind of reflecting the unity of the feminine and natural worlds, was actually something she herself denied. She claimed that her works were not intended to reference any female sexual identity at all. And notably, it was largely the male critics who kind of expounded this view that her work contained all these sexual references. However, despite her publicly kind of denying these claims, O'Keeffe really kind of did focus primarily on this internal view of flowers and plants that she depicted, very specifically the stamens and the reproductive areas of these flowers. And there really is kind of an argumentable idea that she is contesting reproduction and sexuality in her work. However, the works call to attention the center of the flowers, which for the most part are actually androgynous and thus not exclusively feminine. Several feminist critics actually have praised O'Keeffe's work as capturing these feminist themes that were far ahead of her time. Whether or not these sexual references were her intention or not, what I find personally so beautiful going back to Black Iris the Third is that Black irises actually are this symbolizing motif for elegance and independence, wisdom, and rebellion. And I just think that's so beautiful that she chose to represent within her work, and especially as this leading female icon in this modern art revolution. I find that so empowering. And since many of O'Keeffe's images actually contain several flowers on one large canvas, in this way, she kind of seems to capture something of the beauty and vastness of nature all at the same time. Unfortunately, towards the end of this booming decade, the strains of dealing with the competitive New York art world, her growing boredom with Lake George, and her deteriorating relationship with Stieglitz actually took a very heavy toll on her mental and physical health. Although the passion and excitement of their affair had been long gone, O'Keeffe was still very visibly distraught upon learning that her husband was having another affair with another photographer and art advocate, Dorothy Norman, at the time. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Her first extended trip to New Mexico in 1929 was one that had a lasting impact on her life and her work. She would only return to New York for very important exhibitions or special occasions, so she was spending the majority of her time in New Mexico. And something about this region's majestic landscape with its unusual geological formations, its vivid colors, its beautiful clarity of light is something that really astonished her and held her attention for almost 4 decades. And since she has always been drawn to incorporating nature in her works, she often painted rocks, cliffs, and mountains in these dramatic close-ups parallel to her flower pieces. And one of her favorite settings was actually a site she nicknamed the Black Place, which she kind of interpreted both paranormally and in tight views, and emphasizing the very jagged nature of New Mexico's landscape. Her New Mexico era was also what sparked her infamous paintings of these ram skull heads. And they always depicted this conventional landscape with a skull floating in the middle. And many critics actually theorize that it's kind of her own interpretation, as her physical health was really declining, her mental health was declining. Her idea of kind of impending doom, but almost in this serene and beautiful manner that she had just chosen to accept. Unfortunately, the last 2 decades of her life were really unproductive when it came to her artwork. She was really in poor condition with health, and she was actually going blind as well, which really hindered her ability to paint or do anything art related. When she died in 1986 at the age of 98, her ashes were, by request, scattered across the New Mexico landscape, which she had loved for more than half a century. Despite her death, her rich legacy of almost 900 paintings in total has continued to attract subsequent generations of artists and lovers and even nature enthusiasts who really derive inspiration from this modernist icon. And although her career technically was sub-launched by Stieglitz, one of the most progressive and influential figures in the male-dominated art world at the time, his unconsciously sexist ideas about her work just really precipitated this essentialist response. This essentialist response kind of also in a way demeaned her work as a female and really just downplays this broader sense of achievement in her work as an artist. However, Georgia O'Keeffe through this was able to play a key role in disabusing the art community and really destroying this general public notion that gender is any way a determinant of artistic competence or creativity. With this, she was really able to help establish a new and significant space for female artists in a realm that had been heavily dominated by men. Throughout her life and her career, O'Keeffe has also herself often commented that the color and form of her flowers was always just more important than the subject matter itself, suggesting that she was more interested in the natural form and capturing its beauty, in a sense. And as the mother of the modern art world and this leading icon in gender controversy with her work, she still continues to inspire millions of artists today when it comes to subsequent nature landscapes. It really sucks because, unfortunately, although she's so well renowned in the art world, she actually, in the later stages of her life, bought back a lot of her own work that she deemed important, and it's actually just a part of her estate now. So she doesn't have a lot of work displayed publicly in art museums throughout the world. There are very few of them. But one of my dreams one day is actually to see an O'Keeffe in person, which would be amazing. I hope you learned something from this. I hope you took some form of inspiration from this. I hope you found this somewhat vaguely interesting in the least. I hope to come out with a third video soon as I find inspiration for its subject matter. But again, thank you so much for watching, whether you really actually watched this whole thing or not, or skip to the end. I really appreciate anyone who clicked on this video. So watch out for my next video, and thanks for watching!